You're listening to episode 152 of the D6 podcast.
I don't know anything more important in our society or in the kingdom of God than to help the church, help the family.
Discipleship is not an event, it's a way of life.
And one day it just hit me that discipleship at home was not about doing more. It was about inviting Christ into what we were already doing.
The goal of family ministry is not families sitting on the couch holding hands and singing Kumbaya. The ultimate goal is families that love God, love people, and make disciples of all peoples.
So that's why you're here. You're here to say 1 hour a week, as significant and as awesome as it is, we know that it's not enough and we want to be intentional with every hour.
You're listening to the D6 podcast. Here's your hosts, Ron Hunter and Jeremy Lee.
This is the family ministry podcast that helps you connect church and home. Ron, don't yawn when we start a podcast. It says we need energy, man.
You should sound like this is more exciting than you do. Come on.
Come on.
Oh. Let's do it.
We are now an award-winning podcast, so you need to, bring the energy. We have pressure.
I'm telling you, and you should probably expand on that as you just let that out.
Do you know on social media sometimes when people just do a little bit of a humble brag, they're like, oh, by the way, I just happened to win this award. I'm about to totally do that right now because I just found this out. I didn't know. I was sitting at home, just scrolling through the feed, and D6 put out a post that says, hey, Kids with a Z Matter magazine, which is a great magazine for children's ministry world.
Absolutely.
They were ranking the podcasts that their listeners enjoyed. And I looked at the list, and D6 podcast, we were on the list.
That's right.
And we weren't just on the list, Ron.
No.
I mean, humbly.
Do you have the picture? You want to read down all the people that were listed on the list, or a handful of them?
Yes, I'd love to. I've got it right here, actually. And I am humble bragging, but, and here's my thing. I was sitting at home, and I saw that it has our picture on the magazine, and it has us as number one. And I my wife is the best ever, the most supporting, amazing wife ever, but she does not listen to every single podcast. And
no, our families never do listen or pay attention to what we do every day.
Yes, but it must be said she loves and honors and is a fan of what I do. But I said, honey, my podcast, the one I co-hosted, it's number one on this list. She goes, that many people listen? I was like, wait a second.
Oh, I know.
But anyway, yes, there are so many other great folks on this list, and let's just talk about them for a second. Keith Farron, our friend Jim Weidman, Craig Groeschel, everybody, most people know him in the ministry world. TED Talks is on the list.
Ryan Franks is on there.
Ryan Frank, Think Orange, Kidology, Kidmin Talk, great podcast. Go check them all out.
It's a great lineup. And by the way, if you're not familiar with Kids Matter magazine, you need to pick up, go online, search out Kids Matter, subscribe to it, take a look. But I'm not sure how this came about. I think it's a reader opinion poll from the magazine, from people in children's ministry. And it is very humbling to know that more people listen to us than any other podcast, even though there are probably others out there way bigger than us.
Yes, and so thank you, Kids Matter, for this great honor.
Yes, and thank you, listeners, for listening every single week.
Absolutely. Now, I teased this episode today big time.
Yes, you did.
We have Dale Hudson, speaking of children's ministry leaders and leadership coaches. He's one of the best out there, and he's going to talk to us today about if Disney ran your ministry and other leadership lessons. But what I teased is our interview is going really good, and then someone comes in and crashes it and just blows the whole thing up in a whole new way, in a very good way. So you guys are going to enjoy that. And then at the end of the podcast, please don't tune out because we stay with us all the way. We have a huge announcement about the D6 podcast. We are growing, and we are doing some new cool things, and we can't wait to share
This is part of our
with
expansion plans.
Exactly. So we have the big announcement coming up, and we have a fun surprise in our first interview. I think that's enough teasing. Let's jump into our episode today. After the break, we're going to be hearing from Dale Hudson on the topic, if Disney ran your ministry.
Since 2009, the D6 Conference has empowered thousands of church leaders to embrace family ministry and strengthen the connection between church and home. Reaching that many church leaders, think of how many homes and communities across the world have been impacted in the last 9 years. My family, like yours, is among them. As a team here at D6, we've had the privilege of being in Dallas, Louisville, and Greensboro, plus 5 other countries. So each year we prayerfully consider the best place to host this growing international gathering, and we have a big announcement to make. After thoughtful consideration and prayer, we are excited to announce the D6 Conference in 2019 will be hosted in beautiful Orlando, Florida. Did you hear me? Orlando, Florida. The entire team at D6 cannot imagine a more iconic city where you can see families of all ages come together, the very basis of generational discipleship. Imagine debriefing your discipleship strategy on Tom Sawyer Island in the heart of Magic Kingdom. Or take a day at Universal Studios to dream of what your church could do in family ministry. The conference will be hosted at the state-of-the-art Marriott World Center. You gotta check this place out. It's both beautiful and offers fun for your entire family ministry team. So come spend some time away from your daily routine in an affordable city and convention center designed for your family. The D6 Conference is the conversation, Orlando is the venue, but your team brings the chemistry. The D6 Conference always provides world-class learning, networking, and access to family ministry resources. And now we get to do that with you in a brand new way. We can't think of a better place to host the D6 Conference. So lock the dates in your calendar, and we'll see you and your team here in Orlando in 2019.
So 29 years, when you get a chance to learn from someone who's been around doing something for 29 years, you need to pay good attention. And that's what we're going to do today with Dale Hudson, our guest. Dale, thanks for being with us.
My pleasure. Excited to be here.
Dale he's been in children and family ministry for over 29 years. He's helped build some of the largest and fastest growing ministries in the U.S. He's the founder and president of Building Children's Ministry. So my children's ministers are going to probably know this guy, love this guy, and I'm glad you guys are going to get to hear from him today. He helps churches build strong leaders, teams, and ministries. He's the author of 8 books, including The Formula for Building Great Volunteer Teams. You have a book that you've put out called If Disney Ran Your Ministry, and I'd like that to kind of be our theme today because I think that's an interesting thought. And plus, we want to also definitely check in on your leadership lessons that you might have to offer us from your experience.
Sure.
You talk about casting vision like Disney, building teams like Disney, building cool environments like Disney. But there's one chapter that fits our podcast. So Dale, tell us how to connect with families like Disney.
How to connect with families. You know, I don't agree with everything that Disney does. Obviously, they're not a Christian company, but there's so much that we can learn from them. One of the things that they do really, really well, obviously, is they connect with families really well. I think it's like 75 million people are going to walk in a Disney park this year, and the vast majority of those people will be kids and parents. So they are, they're the masters at connecting with kids and families. So there's so much there. We go into the chapter and talk about even small tweaks that you can make to connect better with kids and families. Creating memories. They're so good at creating memories, right?
Yes.
Celebrating birthdays, anniversaries, weddings that are held there. So they've mastered the art of connecting with families. And I always hear people say, if I had their budget, I could do that too. But it's interesting, Walt started with no budget. Matter of fact, if you read his biography, he spent 2 weeks eating dog food. That's all he could afford. But he had a vision and a passion, and that's what brought the budget. So I don't think we can use that excuse that we don't have a budget like they do.
So what you're telling us is if we eat dog food, we'll grow great
That's right.
children's ministry.
That's right.
Okay, so now let's tap into the 29 years, okay? If you could go back and let's say you could start all over again with the knowledge and wisdom you've learned from 29 years, what would you do different?
Don't we all wish we could do that?
Let's try.
Okay. I think the first thing I think about is leading change. I'm afraid a lot of times I came into a ministry and in my youthful zeal, I tried to perpetuate change, but maybe not take it slow enough and not make it a process. Instead of it being an open book, maybe make it a secret diary that I'm trying to get these things done secretly. So that's a big one, is leading change. It's an art, it's a skill that can be done. I was at a church a few weeks ago. It's a downtown church, and I was just amazed at pastor. So this is a downtown historic church, and they have pews. The kind that have the little gold plate on the end that says donated by Sister So-and-so in 1940. And he was about to try to talk them into taking all the pews out and putting chairs in. And he went through a great process. One of the things was, he said, here's what's going to happen if we take these out. We're full. Look around, we're full. We need space to grow. If we take these pews out and add chairs, we'll gain 300 seats. And I thought that was great how he had prepared his church for that and to use those steps for that. So I think leading change, I would try to use more skill in that. Another thing is that it's really not about doing as much as it is equipping. When I first started out, I had to do everything myself. It had to be perfect, and I didn't delegate a lot of times, and I spent my time doing, whereas as a leader, I should have probably spent a lot more time in equipping, right? That's what the Bible says our job is, to equip the saints for the work of the ministry. And so that's another thing that I would go back and would change. Some things I regret. I would have had my priorities a little bit straighter when I first started out. Just to be real honest, I spent too much time at the church. I was there for my kids' ball games, but there was a lot of nights when I should have been at the dinner table that I wasn't. And so I learned that the hard way, that I need to be home. Both my boys love Jesus and serve Jesus, but I've had to go back and apologize to them and say, you know what? I didn't have my priorities right a lot of times. I was so driven, got to change the world, that I didn't spend the time with you that I should have. And so that's a big one as well. Collaboration is huge. I think I've learned to be more collaborative, especially if you're a multi-site. That kind of forces you to be collaborative. And then not equating busyness with success, measuring not just the things I was doing, but the goal is to be productive, right? And so using my time more wisely. Those are the top things that come to mind for me.
All amazing wisdom. If you're young and you're listening, please rewind, review. That could save you a ton of trouble, can't it?
Yeah.
I mean, man.
Yeah.
If we only had a time machine.
That's right.
You've also got a really cool blog called Relevant Children's Ministry. And it's on just about every list I could find of top kid men and blogs. So there you go. Congratulations,
Thank you.
man. That's not easy.
No.
So you wrote a blog called Why Your Kid Men Team Should Be Arguing. So I got to understand, because that's kind of counterintuitive, it feels like. So why should your team be arguing?
Well, when I say arguing, I mean that, I always think that the smartest person in the room is the room. And so we want to learn to collaborate. And that means that we present opposing viewpoints, that we hash things out. We take an idea, and I actually with my staff, I had a wooden block that said idea. And we would lay it on the table. And we said, now, once it's on the table, it's not your idea. It's just an idea, right? But beat that idea up and argue why we should do this, why we shouldn't do this. So it's more of just having the trust that you can argue and debate about things to make sure. Then walk out of the room happy and shake hands and agree to disagree sometimes. But I think you've got to take those ideas and beat them up. You just don't want a bunch of yes people around you, right? I mean, the temptation is to hire or gather volunteers around you who are just yes people. And that's not what you need. You need some people that are going to say, have you thought about this? Play the devil's advocate to make devil's, how do you say that? Advocate. To make sure that you get, the best ideas out there. So I think that's what I meant by that, is just being more beating up ideas and working together. And that takes a lot of trust, right? Again, you sometimes you get attached to that idea. That's my baby, and people start beating it up, and you can get offended. I always say that it's the hardest change is changing something that I started. It's easy to come in and change things somebody else started, but when it gets to be my baby that I started, I don't want to be quite so quick to change it. So just being open to holding the ministry with open hands and being willing to argue and work through those things together.
Wisdom. All right. Another post that I wanted to ask you about was how successful children's ministry leaders spend their time.
Yeah.
I think these principles can be applied to all ministers listening, whether you're youth ministers, pastors, whatever. But let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah, I think that goes back again just to your priorities and being an equipper. and not to do. And I put three things in there. I think one was to spend your time investing and developing people is so important. That's got to be your top priority, because children's ministry and all ministry, it really comes down to the strength of your volunteer team. I always tell people that the success of your ministry is going to rise and fall on the strength of your volunteer team, and so that's where you got to spend your time. Right, is investing in leaders and multiplying yourself and equipping people. Then I also say that the other thing is to spend time with the vision. The vision that God's given you. That's a job you can't delegate away. You as the leader, you got to be the one that champions that vision and keeps that vision fresh. We know vision leaks, so just keep looping it back and bringing it, keeping people excited about it. And then just kind of spearhead where we're headed for the future. As you watch the trends and the times of the season, that you're able to navigate through that and lead toward the future. So I think those are the three big things that I've seen that successful ministers do. They're not out there doing all the little stuff. They're willing to. It's not that they don't want to, but they spend their time at 30,000 feet. Somebody's got to be up there to be able to see ahead, right? If everybody's down here in the trenches. So just spending your time investing in people, sharing and building the vision, and just charting the course for the future as you look, at the 30,000-foot level.
What have you learned about leading from the middle? Children's minister, youth minister, they're not the main one in charge, and they're not. But they do have authority. But so, how do you lead from the middle, especially if you're that go-getter, visionary type person, and you just kind of feel like, man, I'm frustrated that I can't do everything I want to do.
Yeah. I mean, we all have most children's directors or anybody that they have somebody they report to, whether it's the pastor or another staff member, and leading up. I think what you're talking about is leading up. How do you lead up? Well, one thing that I would do when I worked with churches, as I was a children's pastor, when I came across a good article about kids ministry or a good article about youth ministry that showed the benefits of it, I would send that to my pastor. Say, hey, I read this week. I thought you might just like to see this. Now you have to be wise in how you do that. You send that every day.
You overload them.
You're going to overload them, and you're going to be. I always say you need to be the squeaky wheel for children's ministry, right? You got to be. That's your job, is to champion children's ministry and to be the one that's saying, hey, we ought to do this, we ought to do that. But use wisdom, right? Don't send it all the time. But I think leading up is just casting the vision. I remember one church I was at when I first got there. The children's ministry met in the chapel, which was also used for funerals. So you got these stained glass windows, dark, dreary looking, and I was there. That's where we had our children's worship at. And I began to realize that, man, we're not going to grow anymore. We're full, but this is not a kid. If you can have a funeral at a building, it's probably not a good place to have kids ministry, right?
Yeah.
I know there's multi-purpose use, but man, if it's like sit for a funeral, you're not going to be able to have a kids ministry there. So I started casting a vision for a new kids building, leading up and saying, hey, Pastor, I believe if we get this new kids building, we can double our attendance, and just leading up. And so he said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll let you meet with me and the elders. And man, I came in there and I was nervous. I had all my ideas of why we should do this, the vision that I was casting for that. And I shared that, and then kind of the lead elder, he had to leave a little bit early, but he got up, and as he was walking to the door, he looked back and said, I think we need to do this. And I was like, yes. So they had approved several $100,000 for us to, build a new kids area. But it was just because you got to lead up, right?
Yeah.
With wisdom, but you've got to be the champion for your ministry and lead up for sure.
So, okay. Look, I didn't tell you I was going to do this, but we're at D6.
All right.
And, hey, Neil. Wake up, Neil. Could you bring a chair over for me? Mr. Hudson, would you mind coming over and sitting with us?
All right.
So we're at D6, and you told me some really cool stuff. You are here with your dad.
That's right.
And we'll have to get you to sign all the release forms, and we'll have to pay you an appearance fee and everything. But I just really, we're doing a mic too. Check this out. See, we got to keep them awake back here.
Yeah, that's right.
Awesome. Now, we're at D6. We talk about generational discipleship, and you were sharing with me how this man and what he and your mother did with their life completely changed the direction of your life. So while he's here, let's honor him a little bit and share the story.
Well, and he would obviously know the story better than I do. Maybe just tell real quick about your
tell us.
Grandfather and how he came.
Well, the story goes back, of course, many decades to that period of time in our family's life when we were totally unchurched, and not only unchurched, but heading downhill in the wrong direction at a rapid speed. my grandfather on my dad's side was a moonshiner. He made what we call whiskey, in the still form.
So he was the guy everybody wanted to know in town.
Yeah, he was a giant of a man, 6'8", about a 280-pound sawmill by trade, and he was involved in other things. Anyway, he spent his last years in prison, convicted for murder.
Mm.
And he came home to die, having had a stroke in prison. And I, as a little boy, saw him die and scream as he went into the darkness and the fire, he said, lost. And I ran from the little small shanty house where they were out into the woods because it was so terrifying.
Wow.
So he was, we had no Christian influence, no hope, only violence, and it went down to his father, his son, my dad. And when he came home from the Second World War, having fought on the front lines in hand-to-hand combat and having been shot by a sniper and wounded and stayed on the battlefield 72 days without a break from the fighting, he came home with a lot of memories he tried to wash away with drinking alcohol. And our family was terrorized and poverty-stricken and lived in constant fear and uncertainty because of all that.
Mm-hmm.
And in our neighborhood, there was a Christian layman who would go out in the neighborhood each Saturday and just invite people to church. That was his method. And finally, my mother said one Saturday, if you'll come by next week, the boy and I, speaking of myself and my mom, will ride with you to church. And so at about age 9, my mother and I went to church for the first time I could remember and heard the gospel. And not long after that, my dad came home out of the service, and the violent, alcohol-related lifestyle continued. But my mother, as a patient Christian, endured it all. And I, as a teenager, yielded my life to Christ completely and began preaching at age 15.
Married at 16.
And then,
seriously.
And then in the first revival meeting, our pastor had me conduct as a 15-year-old teen. My dad, at age 41, was the first convert. He came forth to be saved.
You're kidding me.
And from that time forward, he laid aside the alcohol and eventually got his temper under control.
Mm-hmm.
And became a wonderful Christian gentleman whose memory is still cherished and stands as an unbelievable testimony in our community to this day. And from my generation, my sons and then their children have seen the grace of God active at work in our lives. So we rejoice, and I have told it all over the country in over 1,700 revivals and some period of pastoring a church a time or two. And then we operated a Christian bookstore for almost 40 years.
Wow.
After that, my wife was the manager of our Christian bookstore after my mother was in there for about the first 10 years of it.
So we talk about D6 being generational.
Yeah.
And the projection for you was to continue with a path of criminal, sickness, addiction, and Jesus entered your life through somebody who showed up at your door.
Right.
And your life was changed. But now look at this. Yes. Now you have 3, you said sons, right?
Right.
Who are following Christ. I'm sitting here interviewing your son at one of the largest family ministry conferences in all the world.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Isn't it amazing?
Unbelievable, almost, yes.
Yeah.
But it's true.
Do you have grandchildren?
Yes, I have 8 grandchildren.
Do any of them follow the Christ?
Our oldest granddaughter has just been employed by Compassion International as a senior at Samford University in Birmingham, and she's already an employee as a senior off campus and has spent several mission trips. And then, of course, Dale's sons are both tremendous Christian gentlemen and pursuing, as lay people, God's will. And then right on down the list, of course, the other 2 boys are in the ministry, the other 2 sons.
So what we're saying here, Mr. Van, just so I can clarify so everybody that's listening can understand, is that God used you. God touched your life, but he didn't just make you a follower of Christ. He made you a spiritual patriarch to the next 3 to 4 generations.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what happened that day didn't just change you, it changed your children,
That's right.
your grandchildren, your great-great-grandchildren, and on and on and on. Forever, you went from criminals to children of God.
Yes,
Amen.
indeed. Yes, so true. Yes, it is true.
Now that's D6 if I've ever heard it. Dale, I appreciate you being here, but man,
Yeah,
thanks
yeah.
for bringing him.
I'm glad I did. You bet.
Hey guys, both of you, thanks for being our guest today.
Our
What a
pleasure.
privilege, what a joy. I honor you, and I honor you, and thank you for being our guest.
Thank you. Our pleasure.
Thank you so much, my brother. Yes.
The DNA of D6 provides any church an opportunity to plan, strategize, evaluate, and refine their approach to discipleship and family ministry. Dr. Ron Hunter's book shares vital philosophy and strategy built on the foundation of Deuteronomy 6. Readers will be able to build on this foundation to disciple every generation in their church. Each book comes with a free church health assessment. Visit d6family.com to find helpful coaching sessions and resources, and order your copy today.
All right, Dale, thank you. If Disney ran your children's ministry and other leadership lessons that we can learn from that, let me flip that around, Jeremy, and say, if you ran to Disney for the D6 conference, what would you do?
Oh, I would interview Richard Ross on Space Mountain. That's my dream. We
Oh,
need to
man.
make that happen. Dr. Ross.
That's right.
Let's go to Disney together and do an interview on Space Mountain. Are you up for it? Tweet me.
I tell you what, we should get all the speakers in line, feed them certain foods, and see which one throws up on Space Mountain while you're interviewing
There you
them.
go. But let's talk about this. What about Dale's dad coming on? And you have history here with
Yes,
him
I
as
do.
well. He is, and I was so shocked to hear how he intertwines with Randall House. Not just that he just comes into this
Yeah.
interview, but what a cool moment that was.
Absolutely. Dale Hudson is kind of an icon inside of our world. He's a retired minister, but not only, if I started casting a little bit of description about him, I think it would fall on somewhat of a, oh, so no big deal. But you have to put it in context. Dale Hudson saw, through the eyes of his father when he was younger, some vision that not many people would get. And I think that helps make him who he is today. Because his father, Vandell, saw the ability for bookstore ministry to be a ministry way back in the 70s. And he opened a bookstore in Mississippi. And he literally did. He ministered to people. He preached. He was an evangelist. The guy was, it was his own form of social network, both his evangelism and his bookstore, and it extended. And I think Dale sort of got this big enterprising ideas from watching his father. And they both have done a tremendous job in ministry. Dale obviously has gone on and been staff leadership inside of mega churches. And I know his father's so proud of him.
That was it. That moment happened, a little just behind the scenes real quick, of how that moment happened. Not planned at all. Didn't know that Dale's father would be with him. But as we were waiting to get started, Dale just started saying, hey, my father's here. And just, I just saw it in his eyes.
Yeah.
I just saw he was just so proud of his dad.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I could just see there was a story there in their relationship. And, you know, this is D6, man. And when we have moments where there's real, authentic, genuine spiritual legacy and relationship, that's the story.
It's always generational.
All of the
Always
other things that Dale
generational.
could have taught us were great. But I was like, we got to get this.
Yeah.
And it worked out amazing. Okay, we can't hold back any longer, Ron.
Nope. Our
We
D6
have a
podcast
huge announcement.
We talked about, the rating that we got from Kids Matter magazine. We are never satisfied. This year at the D6 conference, our theme is recalibrate, and we're trying to apply that to all areas. What can we do to recalibrate to make things better? We're applying it to the podcast. How can we recalibrate? Continue to bring you the very best content. And to do that, we're expanding, and we're adding one more interviewer to our lineup. And I'm excited that we are going in this direction. And this guy that we're adding is not a novice. He's been doing podcasts for quite a while. And he has, I think, further reaching relationships than what we have in some other fields that you and I just don't have.
Which translation means we're going to have even cooler guests.
That's
we've
right.
had amazing ones, but
Right.
we're going to take it to a whole nother level.
That's right. And I think you as the listener are going to be the benefactors of this.
Yes.
And you'll appreciate it as we get further and down the road on even this year's calendar.
Yes, yes. So tell them who it is.
Yes, it is David Jones. David is one of our senior editors here at Randall House, and he has been one of the key architects behind our young adult devotional magazine called The Brink. And he actually works as the lead architect, constantly producing all the devotional study guide magazines for teens and adults. So when we think about our adults, we always divide them into seasons. Adults without kids, adults with kids in the home, and adults with grown kids. And all three of those fit underneath his umbrella of responsibility. And part of The Brink is they've had their own podcast. And I have been blown away at the level of stature. I'm trying to think of the right word to give credence to what David has done. The people who he's had on in his podcast and the people who he's interviewed inside the print magazines on an ongoing basis would blow away the average reader. And so, if you're a young adult, you're an adult without kids, or maybe you're still, that might be a devotional magazine you want to pursue in addition to listening to the podcast. But you're going to really welcome David's no-nonsense approach to interviewing and how he brings out the very best in his guests.
All right, Ron. Now, we're so excited to have a new team member. What we did was, because we don't just want to hear his voice without knowing his heart. So we've done an interview with David. And so let's spend some time listening to David and learning more about who he is and what he's all about.
And our audience from there will continue to grow to appreciate him more and more.
He's great. Let's listen to David. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so excited. There are times I'm a fan of many teams, the Tennessee Vols, who lose a lot in football. I'm a fan of the Tennessee Titans, who lose a lot in football. But so I don't know that I'm an expert on teams, but this is what I do know. If you are going to grow and build a winning team, you have to have regular, new blood, new additions, free agents, if you will. And on our D6 podcast team, which is growing and getting better, we love having you guys listen. We have a new team member, and that is my honor today. I get to introduce you to our new co-host, Mr. David Jones. What's up, David?
Hey, how's it going?
Now, the idea here is that our listeners, who we love, you love them too, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You've been a listener.
I am a fan of our fans.
That is amazing. Yes. And you listen to the podcast.
I do.
So, we'll get to that in just a second. But before we get too far, I want you guys to understand a little bit about David's background. Now, you have been with, D6. Everybody knows it as D6. Some know it as Randall House.
Right.
You guys kind of have a dual name going on. But you're actually on the team there, right?
Yes, I am. I've been there for about 11 years now.
That is way too long.
It is a long time.
You can't find another job?
If my bosses are listening to this, I don't want to answer that question.
Hey!
But if this was a video podcast, you could see by my hair how the 11 years have gone. It's been a trying time. I came in with a full head of hair, and it's dwindling at this point.
At least you have hair. You're winning on that front.
Well, I do now. Let's give it a couple months.
And now I don't know if at the time of this recording does Ron still have his beard? Yes. So if Ron has a beard, I have a beard, and those, again, not a video podcast, they can't see, but you have a beard as well. So you have to keep it now because we could be the bearded podcast host.
I will do that, and I'll grow it out thicker too.
Oh.
No trimming, no shaving. We'll go all out with this.
You heard it here first. Mark that. Producers, mark that. We're going to need to keep that as a promise just in case he loses his courage and doesn't grow it out. He has promised us a lumberjack beard. How long will it take you to get a lumberjack beard?
Typically, with the way my beard grows, we're probably looking at 2 days. Yeah, I've been shaving since 5th grade. My 5 o'clock shadow comes in around 11 a.m.
That's my man right there.
Yeah.
That is my man. All right, so let's start with this. You have been listening to the podcast. You've always been an encourager. I know you're kind of been our secret shopper. You'll give us some encouragement on how to improve and those kind of things. And now you're a part of the team. What are some of the things that you enjoy most about the podcast?
Probably the thing that I love most is just hearing from different people from all walks of life. Sometimes it's super serious, and sometimes it's not exactly
Not
so
at all.
serious. One of my favorite interviews is when you interview the Skit Guys. Now, this is going way back.
Yeah.
But I just loved it because in some ways, you just let them do their thing and let them go wherever they want. But you steered that conversation, had to bring the ship back a couple times.
For sure,
But
man.
Just listening to that, I mean, how well it translated to audio. I think I was actually there watching it live when it happened, and then I got to listen to it again, and just so funny to hear those guys go. But that's one of those things, yeah, it's a little bit goofy, it's a little bit funny, but when you start listening to really what's going on, you realize there's a heart of a message that's there. And you're hearing from these guys from all walks of life, whether they're the stand-up comedians, whether it's a preacher, whether it's a missionary. We're covering all topics on this. And that's one of the things I love about this podcast, that no matter what you're involved in ministry, no matter what your interests are or what you're doing, this podcast fits you in your stage of life.
Yeah, now we've already identified you're going to have a huge, thick lumberjack beard. You have a golden voice for radio. That's obvious. And so now that you're a part of the team, talk to us a little bit about what your role is going to be in the podcast.
Well, I will be interviewing people. I'm learning from the master, that would be you. And I will be interviewing people for some of our segments coming up on the podcast. At this point, we've already kind of started that. I'm excited for people to hear it.
Yes.
And I'm going to kind of just sit back and let them tell us their stories and tell us about what they're doing and let us hear their expertise. And it's been pretty fulfilling for me just to hear, again, people from all walks of life telling about what God's doing in their life and how he's blessing them. And so I'm just looking forward to kind of hearing more stories and letting people tell theirs.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to close out with letting people learn some things about you personally. But really, let's be honest, we're all selfish people.
That's
Our
true.
listeners want to know, yeah, David, what's in it for me? So as you come in to this podcast, one of the things I want to make sure people know is that you have some real, we've mentioned this in a couple of episodes we've recorded, that you have some very real connections into the book publishing world, being a publisher and the editor of a magazine. You know folks. And I want to get into your cell phone because you've got some good numbers, some good email addresses. And listen, I think that's what you guys need to understand. David is going to help us. We always have amazing guests, but they're going to get even better, aren't they?
I hope I can bring that.
Yeah, well, you better.
Yeah, that's... we'll see. I mean, you talked at the beginning about the concept of team and how some teams stink and some teams don't, and bringing fresh blood on board. I haven't heard my contract details yet, so I'm still waiting on that. Maybe a little negotiation going on. Yeah,
signing bonus.
I may be cut in 6 months. Who knows? I may not make it out of training camp. But yeah, I'm looking forward to. I mean, one of the things I love about my job, and that's both the editing side and that is the podcast side. It's the people, and I know that may sound cliche, but I love the people. And that is the team members that I work with day in, day out in the office. But that's the people that I get to talk to and I get to interview and the publicists I get to work with. Building those relationships is great, but I just love hearing people's stories. Everybody out there has a story. Every one of our listeners out there has a story to tell. And I love getting to hear from these people, whether they've written a book, whether they've made an album, whatever it may be. I'm looking forward to hearing them tell their stories.
All right. Well, then I'm going to give you, speaking of stories, let's hear a little bit about your story.
Okay.
We're going to do lightning round questions.
Yes.
To finish out our interview. Are you ready for this?
Let's do it.
I have no idea what I'm about to ask you, so
I don't either.
This is going to get very interesting. Are you ready, producers, to edit?
Mom, turn it off if you're listening.
Here
we don't know where this is going.
Go. Favorite gas station snack?
We're going to go with a candy bar. We're going to go between Snickers and combos. I'm an indecisive person.
I'm sorry. We need an answer.
Pepperoni pizza combos. There you go.
Pepperoni pizza combos. You're salty and not sweet. That's what I just learned about you.
That is true.
Enneagram number.
You know, I took the test once and it came back and said it was inconclusive and it could not figure out something for me. I failed the test. You're not supposed to be able to fail the test, and I failed the test. So I don't know.
Salty, inconclusive
Loser.
test failure. Myers-Briggs?
I am an ISTJ.
ISTJ. What's your animal in the animals? The lion, the otter, the beaver. Do you know that one?
I am very high on the beaver scale.
We got a salty beaver.
Yes.
With a big beard. I love all of this. Okay, favorite baseball team?
Oh, I'm a diehard St. Louis Cardinals fan, and I will fight somebody who comes against me.
NFL?
Sorry, Cubs fans. NFL, okay, this is where the saltiness comes in because I was a St. Louis Rams fan. If you can't tell, I'm originally from St. Louis.
There you go.
They broke my heart. They left the city. So I'm kind of a floating free agent right now.
Nice.
Yes, I will take bribes.
Titans got nothing to offer you, but suffering. That's what we can offer you. All right, so let's go. Let's keep it going. NBA.
Not a huge NBA fan. Maybe
then scratch that. We won't talk about that.
I may be riding the bandwagon and just enjoying Golden State while they're at their best.
Okay, we have just one more minute, so we need to get this going. You're on death row. You have one last meal. What am I serving you?
We're going to go a little bit above the pepperoni pizza combos on this. Let's keep it local, and let's go with a Tennessee burger from Burger Republic. If you haven't had it, try it, along with tater tots, and we'll go with a Coke Zero just to wash it down.
All right, I've saved the best question for last. Listeners, I know you've been on the edge of your seat to hear this. I know you have a baby.
I do.
When that baby grows up and it's time to introduce them to Star Wars, in what order will you let them watch the movies?
Oh, we are starting with episode 4. We will run it through the end, and maybe when he's old enough, I will let him know about episodes 1 through 3 and let it be his choice if he wants to watch it. But as for now, those movies are dead to me and him.
That is why we have chosen David Jones to be upon this team, man. Welcome. I'm looking forward to working with you. I know you're going to level up this podcast. I know our listeners are excited. Thanks for being with us, sir.
Well, thanks. I enjoy it, and I'm looking forward to it.
Well, our thanks go to David, and as promised, David, like we said, because he's been in the publishing world for so long, he knows publicists, and he can just connect to some people that we may not be able to connect with. And we're actually going to start next week with a really great, cool guest on the podcast.
What better way to introduce David to the podcast than for him to bring his very first guest with a wow factor, Candace Cameron Bure. And I don't know about all of our listeners, but I'll just confess, every time we get around Christmas time, my wife has the app. She has the T-shirt. I bought her one. She bought one for herself. We didn't know it. We ordered them from, watching Hallmark movie channels, Hallmark Christmas movie channels. That's the big thing. And if you've watched those at all, you've seen Candace Cameron Bure in those movies. And there's just, to see her, he's going to bring her to life on our podcast. Most of you know her story, her walk with God, and he's going to get a chance to bring her to life here on the podcast with our audience.
And that is next week, guys. So
Yep.
You're going to get to see David in action as he interviews a great new guest. And then we also have a friend of the podcast, a friend of D6 that has been with us before, but it's great to have her back, Dana Gresh.
That's correct. And she's releasing a brand new book you'll want to hear about.
It's going to be a great episode, a whole new world for the D6 podcast. I'm very, very excited, and I hope you are too. And I hope you guys have a great week of ministry.
You've been listening to the D6 Podcast. You can learn more about D6 at d6family.com.